still remember that night clearly, the moment I discovered that the person I trusted most, a veteran park ranger, was the mastermind behind the mysterious disappearances. He hid behind animal masks, using legends to conceal his brutal crimes for decades. I fought to escape the grasp of that monster, but the ghosts of the past never let go. If you think this is just an ordinary family story, you're wrong. Subscribe now so you won't miss the gripping episodes coming up next from us. It begins not with thunder, but with the silence that always follows disaster. Olivia Turner stands alone at the edge of the timberline, the early summer dusk bleeding orange into purple above the evergreen ridges of northern Alberta. Every night, the wind combs through the trees and brings with it memories she can never quite silence: the roar of falling rock, the sudden wrench of the earth splitting open her brother's voice, lost to the avalanche. That sound, her own scream echoing in the mountain air, still sometimes drags her awake in the small hours, leaving her shivering, pressed flat against the mattress, as if the weight of stone pressed down on her chest. She is, to anyone who meets her, a model of resilience, the youngest park ranger ever appointed to the sprawling Evergreen National Park, decorated twice for heroism. The rare kind of soul who knows how to track a cougar through fresh snow, or coax a half-frozen hiker back to the trailhead with a single joke and a cup of bad coffee. But beneath that practiced calm, a current of old grief and guilt runs cold. Olivia Turner is alive, and her brother is not. That equation defines the architecture of her life. Her cabin is small and neat, perched alone on a high slope miles from the nearest neighbor. A patchwork of firewood, battered maps, and faded Polaroids taped to the fridge, her and Liam, ages 5 and 7, arms slung around each other, grinning beneath a waterfall. There's a photograph of their parents, and one more always at the back of Liam alone, age 17, waving at the camera from the summit of Mount Bleak. She keeps the place spotless, but it isn't really for herself. It's as if she's forever expecting someone to come back home. Olivia wakes early, always slipping from bed before dawn and lacing up boots in the blue half-light. She likes the cold, the solitude, the routines that keep her hands busy and her mind from wandering. Each morning she runs a loop through the pines, letting the old dogwood branches whip against her legs, breathing the icy air so deeply it burns. She eats oatmeal standing up at the sink, reads the radio logs, checks the weather, and scribbles reminders to herself in the little green notebook she keeps in her chest pocket. She always leaves the radio on even when she's off duty, sometimes hoping illogically that one day it'll crackle with Liam's voice coming in, faint and distant, through the static. She's known around this park as reliable, unflappable, even when the unexpected happens. There was the spring, a black bear broke into the ranger station, and she chased it out with a broom, laughing. There was the hiker with a broken leg stuck out on the scree field until midnight. Olivia carried him 2 miles back to safety. She rarely talks about her brother, but everyone in town knows the story whispered in bars and grocery lines. The girl who lived when her brother did not. The avalanche survivor. Tonight, as the sun fades, she's seated at her battered pine table, still in her uniform, eating reheated chili from a mug and scrolling absently through her phone. There are messages from her mother: call when you can. Love you. There's a group chat from work, some joke about the boss's new haircut. There are, as always, the old texts from Liam. She never deletes them. Her thumb hovers, then drops the phone. She is halfway to washing dishes when her phone buzzes again, this time with a number she doesn't recognize, area code somewhere out in Saskatchewan, but the numbers look wrong, not quite real. She frowns, wipes her hands, and answers without thinking. At first, there's only static, then a faint, broken laughter, high-pitched, echoing, almost mechanical. She freezes. In the background, something else, a crackling, as if the wind itself is being filtered through a machine. Then very softly a voice distorted, genderless whispers. Do you see the lights, Sable Lake? Tonight? Come see. The call cuts out before she can answer. Olivia stands in the sudden silence, the phone heavy and cold in her palm. She checks the number again. No callback, no message. Just that eerie, glitched laughter ringing in her ears. Her mind snaps instantly to the lake, Sable Lake, a sweep of cold blue ringed by black firs at the park's farthest boundary. The locals call it the Lake of Lost Voices. For as long as anyone can remember, Sable has been off limits. Not just because of the treacherous bogs or the sharp drop-offs beneath the water, but because of the stories. The vanished hikers. The search teams that come back shaken, muttering about strange lights flickering across the water. Laughter that echoes on nights when the fog hangs low. The elders in the Cree community whisper that Sable is a place of crossings where the world thins and things slip through. Olivia, practical, tough-minded, has never believed in ghosts. She believes in real dangers, loose rocks, thin ice, a branch cracking under your boot just as you reach the ledge. But the unease prickles up her spine anyway. The park's incident log is full of redacted lines. Missing Sable Lake perimeter. Report of voices after dark. Do not approach after nightfall. She's read every page, but the explanations never make sense. She grabs her notebook, flips to the last entry. 3 days ago, a young couple from Calgary had gone hiking near Sable and come back ashen-faced, refusing to say what they'd seen. Lights like flashbulbs, but underwater the girl finally managed. The boyfriend had left his camera by the lakeshore, never went back for it. Olivia hesitates. There's protocol, of course. Calls like this should be routed through the park's night dispatcher, and no one, especially not a lone ranger, is supposed to approach Sable after dark. But something else gnaws at her, the memory of Liam's last words, spoken in a low voice the night before the avalanche, when they'd huddled by a fire at the summit. Some things out here want to stay hidden, but some things need to be found. She texts her supervisor covering North Boundary. No issues. We'll check in at midnight. A half-truth. She arms herself with her flashlight, the good radio, a utility knife, and tucks the green notebook into her jacket. As she steps out into the fading light, the air is cool, perfumed with pine and the distant tang of rain. Her boots crunch on the gravel path as she heads toward the trailhead, passing the ranger station, its windows glowing gold behind her. She hears for a moment the faintest echo of laughter, again her own memory or something else, and sets her jaw pressing forward. The walk to Sable is a hard one, even by daylight. A mile of steep switchbacks, then another half-mile through marshy ground, ducking under wind-felled birch and stumbling over moss-covered logs. Olivia's mind runs in 2 directions at once. Part of her is focused on the practical. What if this is a prank? What if someone needs help? And the other part, smaller but insistent, remembers the stories her grandfather told her when she was a child about the lights over Sable, about the voices that called from the fog, about those who went looking for answers and were never seen again. It's full dark by the time she reaches the old fence line that marks the park's do not enter zone. Her breath comes hard in the cold air fogging in front of her face. There in the distance, over the black mirror of the lake, she sees it, a flash of blue, then gold skipping across the water, gone in an instant. Another flicker green, like a firefly. Then nothing. Olivia's heart pounds in her chest. She glances back, but the trail is empty, the world behind her, silent except for the soft lap of water and the wind in the trees. She steps forward, boots sinking into the moss, every nerve on edge. She isn't afraid of the dark, not after what she's survived. But tonight the dark feels different. Heavy, thick, alive. A branch snaps in the distance, and she freezes, listening. Nothing. The laugh, sharp and electric, echoes across the lake as if from nowhere. She turns, shining her flashlight in a wide arc, seeing nothing but fog glimmer and the pale bones of driftwood along the shore. She kneels, examining the mud. Their boot prints, fresh, larger than her own, heading deeper into the thicket. Next to them, something stranger, a drag mark, as if someone had hauled something heavy through the underbrush. She frowns, snapping photos marking the location in her notebook. The wind picks up, carrying with it a single, undeniable truth: she is not alone. The call, the laughter, the lights somewhere ahead, beyond the veil of mist, someone is waiting. Olivia tightens her grip on the flashlight, squares her shoulders, and steps forward, heart hammering as the last colors of the day vanish and the real story, the story of the living and the lost, begins. The forest at night was a living thing, breathing, shifting, always whispering, just out of reach. As Olivia made her way back from the edge of Sable Lake, the strange blue-green glimmers still haunting the back of her eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She'd learned a long time ago that in the wild, trusting your instincts was a matter of survival. Tonight, every nerve in her body was strung tight, humming with a warning she couldn't ignore. But Olivia Turner was nothing if not methodical. Back at her cabin, she locked the doors, slid the bolt into place, and sat at her little desk staring at the phone in her hand. She pulled up the call log again, the unknown number, the garbled laughter, the whisper about the lights at Sable Lake. The number had already vanished from her phone as if it had never existed. No message, no record. She took a breath, trying to slow her racing thoughts. If it was a prank, it was a damn good one. Olivia slid open her laptop and opened up the Ranger system. The park's incident database was notoriously buggy and outdated, a relic of some federal procurement project gone wrong. But she knew its quirks as well as she knew her own heartbeat. She started searching for any previous complaints or reports about Sable Lake keywords, lights, sounds, missing laughter. The search crawled along lines of digital dust, scrolling by incident after incident, many marked as unfounded or unsubstantiated. But a pattern emerged, a handful of late-night reports, all with the same chilling details: flashes of unnatural light, bursts of distant laughter, the sense of being followed. Most had been dismissed, the park's budget too tight for more than a cursory check. She clicked into the oldest report 10 years ago. A volunteer botanist had called in, voice trembling, describing a ring of fireflies moving in perfect circles above the water, then vanishing. Another, a retired police officer from Winnipeg, swore he heard a child's laughter echoing across the lake. The final entry, advised not to return. Official explanation: will-o'-the-wisps, natural gas, case closed. Olivia didn't believe in will-o'-the-wisps, and she sure as hell didn't believe in coincidences. She jotted down the case numbers in her notebook, the list of names. A new, sharper unease crept in. The system time-stamped every report, and everyone came in between midnight and 3 a.m. Something about the hour felt significant, like the world between worlds. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice the headlights rolling up the gravel outside her cabin. It was only the crunch of boots on the porch that snapped her out of her trance. She peered through the blinds and recognized the familiar slouch of Dave McAllister, the district's senior ranger, a man with a face like sunburnt leather and eyes that never missed a trick. She opened the door before he could knock. He studied her for a long second, then nodded. "Heard you were poking around Sable Lake," he said quietly. Olivia's mouth went dry. "Just checking on a tip," she replied, keeping her voice steady. Dave stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He set his radio on the table, then looked at her hard. "Look, Liv, I know you're the toughest one out here, but Sable's different. Place gets under people's skin." He dropped his gaze fingers, tracing an invisible scar across the table. "You remember Jenkins? From the east side, lost his partner out there last year. Still won't talk about it. If you ask me, Sable's cursed." She almost laughed, almost. "You think I'm scared of a lake?" Dave shook his head, his voice low. "No. I think you're scared of ghosts." For a moment, the cabin was silent, except for the ticking of the old wind-up clock on the shelf. "You're not the only one who lost someone, Olivia. Don't let the past get you killed." She bristled, the old familiar anger sparking to life. But beneath it was gratitude, a flicker quickly hidden. "I'll be careful," she said. "Promise." Dave hesitated, searching her face for a long moment, then nodded. "You see anything at all, you call it in. Don't play the hero." He left as quickly as he'd come, headlights retreating down the dark road, leaving Olivia alone with the night and her thoughts. She turned back to her desk, but she couldn't focus on the screen. Her hands found the battered red notebook tucked in the bottom drawer. The spine was cracked, pages dog-eared from years of handling. Liam's handwriting slanted and wild, looping through stories and sketches of trees, stars, creatures he'd dreamed up on their long hikes. She flipped to a dog-eared page dated the winter before he disappeared. The ink was faded but legible. Saw the lights again, near Sable, like little blue fires moving in the trees. Told Olivia, but she says it's just swamp gas. It's not. I heard someone laughing too. Like a kid, but weird, echoing, almost like it was inside my head. Kinda cool, kinda creepy. Her throat tightened. How many times had she brushed off his stories, too grown up for campfire tales, too busy to listen? If she'd paid more attention, would things have ended differently? Would he have gone to the summit alone? Would she still be haunted by his absence? She thumbed through more pages. Dad says stay away from Sable after dark. Says people go missing, but nobody talks about it. Think he's just trying to scare me. Maybe he's right. Still want to see what's out there, and won the last entry written in a rush. The night before the avalanche, if something happens, tell Olivia I'm not scared. I want to find the truth. Olivia pressed her hand flat to the page, feeling the shape of the letters through the paper, as if she could reach across the years and touch him, her little brother, the reckless, sweet-hearted boy who believed nothing was too mysterious to solve. She felt her resolve tighten. She wouldn't let fear or superstition decide for her. The truth was waiting at Sable, and she was going to find it whatever the cost. Her phone buzzed again, this time, a text from Katie, another ranger on the north side. Hey, got a weird report, lights near Sable again. Dispatch says not to bother, but thought you'd want to know. Be safe. She didn't reply. Instead, she grabbed her pack and started making preparations. She checked her gear with ritual precision, flashlight, new batteries, knife, spare radio water, flare gun. She double-checked her boots, the laces, the emergency beacon. Last, she slipped Liam's notebook into her jacket, the weight of it like a promise against her heart. The moon was a sliver barely lighting the trail as Olivia stepped outside. She moved silently, a shadow among shadows, her senses sharpened by adrenaline and a dread she wouldn't name. At the trailhead, she paused, scanning the darkness. Somewhere out there beyond the reach of her flashlight, the truth waited whatever form it took. She remembered the warnings, Dave's gruff concern, Katie's cautious text, even the words from her brother's battered notebook. All told her the same thing. Stay away, keep safe, don't go chasing ghosts. But Olivia Turner wasn't built that way. She was forged in disaster, shaped by loss. When the unknown called, she answered. The woods grew denser as she pressed on the trees crowding overhead, blotting out what little moonlight there was. Every noise felt magnified, the snap of a branch, the scurry of a night animal, the slow, steady beat of her own heart. She stopped once, twice to steady her breath, to fight down the memories that threatened to surface, snow falling. Liam's laughter, the thunderous collapse that had changed everything. But this was a new mystery. And Olivia, even as the night closed around her, felt a strange surge of hope, something Liam would have understood. Maybe if she found the truth at Sable, she could finally lay the past to rest. Maybe, just maybe, she could stop running from the ghosts. She kept moving, every step deliberate, guided by a stubborn certainty that she was meant to be here, in this moment, at the edge of something both ancient and unknown. And as the first chill wisps of mist curled up from the lake, Olivia Turner stepped across the last line of safety, into the dark, into the story, into whatever waited for her at Sable's haunted shore. Olivia Turner's boots pressed into the spongy earth, dew-laden moss, sucking at the soles with every step. Night had choked the last blue from the sky, and the world around Sable Lake felt unreal, like she'd crossed a line into a darker version of her own park. The trees seemed to huddle closer, the air thickening with a wild, restless energy. Her headlamp's beam jittered across trunks, catching on the glimmer of damp bark, the sharp gleam of a spider's web. The beam would have felt comforting anywhere else, but not here. Not now. She paused, every sense tuned to the environment. The woods had always been her ally, a language she read as easily as a map, the tremble of leaves, the tracks pressed into mud, the rhythm of crickets and wind. But tonight even the woods felt foreign, wrong. The normal chorus of nighttime creatures was fractured, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. She swept the light in a slow arc. The soft hiss of wind in the reeds was interrupted by something new. A faint crackle like a radio searching for a signal. Olivia blinked, steadying herself. Maybe it was just her imagination, a product of too many ghost stories and too little sleep. She almost missed the first clue, a thin wisp of smoke coiling upward from the far side of a downed spruce near the lake's edge. Her instincts locked onto it instantly. Smoke meant fire, and fire meant people. Someone had been here, maybe still was. Olivia dropped low, moving in silence the way her father had taught her long ago. Heel toe, don't break the twigs. She circled wide, flanking the smoke until she could see its source through the brush. A campsite, fresh makeshift, abandoned in a hurry. The fire pit was ringed with rough stones, the logs still smoldering embers glowing orange in the dark. A battered aluminum kettle balanced on a rock, steam curling from its spout. A half-eaten protein bar lay in the dirt, the wrapper flapping in the breeze. Olivia scanned the site for signs of life shadows movement, the flash of an eye in the dark, but saw only the flicker of flames, the slow decay of heat. She crouched, laying a hand above the embers, feeling the warmth. Someone had left less than an hour ago, maybe less. She swept her beam around the perimeter. Footprints crisscrossed the mud, at least 3 sets, she guessed, judging by the size and depth. Some small, some much larger. One print close to the fire was unusually deep, the tread pattern not from any boot she recognized. It looked almost handmade, the outline odd, as if whoever made it had a limp or dragged their heel. A sense of violation crept in. Sable Lake was off limits, posted with more warnings than any other place in Evergreen. Yet here someone had camped with impunity, left their mark, their scent. Olivia moved with caution, checking the surrounding trees for more clues. Above her, low branches had been snapped bark, scuffed by hurried hands. She knelt and examined a flattened patch of ferns. Someone had sat there, watching the fire knees drawn to chest. A single silver earring glinted in the moss, snatched up and pocketed as evidence. And then her light caught something stranger, symbols carved into the nearest tree. Olivia leaned in, tracing the shallow grooves with her gloved fingers. Not initials, not the usual X loves Y graffiti of bored campers. These were deliberate geometric triangles intersecting circles, a spiral that twisted into itself, a jagged line bisecting the shapes like a scar. She squinted, snapping a photo with her phone, heart pounding. She moved from tree to tree, finding more symbols on birch and pine, even on the rocks by the water's edge. Some were old, weathered by years of rain. Others looked freshly cut, sap still weeping from the wounds. The patterns made no sense, yet felt organized, as if mapping out a territory or warning off intruders. Olivia's mind raced codes, warnings a game or something more, as she crouched to examine a particularly intricate carving. The quiet exploded. From deep within the woods came a burst of laughter, wild, manic, echoing between the trunks. The sound skittered across the lake, too loud and too sudden to be natural. Her breath caught, adrenaline surging, every muscle ready to bolt. She pressed herself against the nearest tree, killing her light, letting darkness swallow her whole. For a moment, she was nothing but breath and heartbeat, waiting for the next sound. The laughter died away, swallowed by the woods. Silence rushed in, broken only by the wind. Olivia counted slowly, calming her nerves. She'd been through worse, storm-lost, cliff-hung, stalked by predators. Fear was a tool, not a master. She flipped her light back on the beam, trembling only slightly. She knelt by the water, eyes sweeping the shoreline. Sable Lake was notorious for its clear, still surface, like a piece of black glass. Tonight, though, the water felt restless, quivering with every gust. On the shore, a line of footprints led to a small outcrop, a place for watching or hiding. She followed them, careful not to disturb the pattern. At the outcrop, she found more tiny piles of stones stacked in careful cairns, each topped with a sliver of bone. The sight twisted her stomach. Offerings, markers. She knelt, examining one cairn found. The bones were bird, squirrel, small mammals, stripped clean. Someone had arranged them with intent. The wind shifted, and with it came another sound, a low mechanical whine, like a generator starting up, thin and far away. Olivia froze, scanning the darkness for any sign of light, a glimmer through the trees. Nothing. But the sound grew warbling, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She remembered the reports, sounds like engines, but wrong, metal grinding, but nowhere near the road. Her skin crawled. She flicked her radio on, whispered her position, static, then a burst of garbled speech. She tried again. More static, the line dead. She turned her attention back to the symbols, trying to remember if she'd seen anything like them before. In Liam's notebook, maybe she pulled it out, flipping through the pages by lamplight. There, near the back, sketches of symbols he'd copied from somewhere. One matched what she'd found on the tree, a spiral inside a triangle. Beneath it, in Liam's scrawl, Sable boundary danger. A line drawn beneath as if to emphasize its meaning. A sudden metallic clang snapped her head up. The sound bounced across the water close. She slid into a crouch, moving silently toward its source, every sense stretched to breaking. The mechanical whine faded, replaced by a rhythmic clicking, as if something metal was striking stone in a steady pattern. She crept along the shore, the darkness pressing in. Another laugh rang out closer this time, childlike, then dissolving into static. She reached a small cove, half choked with reeds. There, jutting from the mud, was an old rusted generator, ancient, half swallowed by the earth wires, tangled like roots. The sound came from within a fan blade, spinning, catching on itself. Olivia knelt, inspected the machine. Someone had tried to start it recently. Fuel still pooled in the tank, a muddy handprint on the switch. Why here, who needed power this far from everything? The laughter rang out again, this time layered, multiple voices overlapping, as if recorded and replayed through broken speakers. Olivia shivered, every childhood warning screaming at her to leave. But she pressed on, circling the cove, following the trail of footprints. She found more signs of haste, a backpack torn open, its contents. Scattered maps, an empty camera case, a child's shoe, the kind with blinking lights in the sole. The shoe blinked once, twice, then died. She picked it up, heart twisting, and tucked it into her pack. Evidence. Proof that someone, maybe more than one, was missing out here. She checked her phone, but the battery had dropped to red, draining far faster than usual. Something out here was wrong, fundamentally wrong. Another symbol on the stone, this one. Different, almost like a face, jagged mouth, hollow eyes. Olivia snapped a picture, then heard another noise, breathing harsh and fast, not her own. She whipped around beam, searching nothing. Just trees, fog, and the endless dark. She pressed herself against a boulder, listening. The mechanical whine started again, closer, almost right behind her, then cut off as suddenly as it had begun. Olivia's breath came quick, shallow, but she refused to panic. She counted 1, 2, 3, then pushed forward, moving back toward the main camp. At the edge of the abandoned fire, she found one last sign, a message scrawled in ash on a flat rock: help. The letters were crooked, desperate, half erased by dew. Olivia touched the word, imagining the fear that wrote it. Someone had been here. Someone needed her. She could not, would not leave, no matter the risk. Yet beneath her determination, fear gnawed. Not just for herself, but for the shadow of her brother, for the children whose laughter echoed through the night, for the unknown number of souls tangled in Sable's secrets. Her hands shook as she tucked the evidence away, but her jaw set firm. She had come too far to turn back. The wind whipped up, scattering embers across the ground, flaring them briefly into light. Olivia stood back, straight eyes scanning the shadows. Whatever waited in these woods, human or otherwise, she was not leaving without answers. She pressed forward deeper into the darkness, the weight of the lost and the living pushing her on. With every step, the laughter grew fainter, the mechanical sounds fading to whispers. But Olivia knew the night was far from over. The mystery of Sable Lake, the cipher etched into bark and bone, the chilling evidence of those who'd come before. None of it would let her rest. But neither would she. She would find the truth, even if it meant facing every ghost these woods could conjure. The woods were breathing harder now, as if each branch and trunk was holding in a secret. Olivia, alone but for her pounding heart and the storm of adrenaline in her veins, moved carefully between the trees, her headlamp trembling as she swept it across the underbrush. The night was alive with shapes and shadows, but it was what she heard that pushed her deeper. The mechanical whine still pulsing, drawing her like a moth to an exposed wire. She'd left the last remnants of the abandoned camp behind. Every clue collected: a burned protein bar, a child's shoe symbols etched into stone and bark, all stuffed in the side pocket of her backpack, anchoring her to the reason she was here. But it was the sound, insistent and alien, that guided her now. She moved toward it, tracking its echo across the tangle of roots and ancient ferns. It was close, a rising electronic chirr, stuttering, then warbling, like a tape slowed and warped. Olivia pressed through a dense stand of alders. The air grew colder, tinged with the metallic tang of something electrical. Her breath fogged in the beam of her headlamp. She stopped, crouched low. There, half buried beneath a fallen log and layers of dead leaves, was a box, black battered, pitted with rust. It looked like an artifact from another century, out of place among the moss and fungus. Antennae jutted from its side like the broken legs of an insect. She brushed aside leaves, gloved hands trembling. The device hummed softly, a series of green LEDs blinking in rhythm with the chirr. It had no brand, no modern markings, only a serial number deeply scratched into its side. The dials were labeled in faded Cyrillic, their faces smeared with years of grime. A red light pulsed at the center, just under the cracked plastic window. Olivia reached for her radio, snapped a quick picture, and tried to describe what she was seeing. But the line was dead, only static. Her phone, too, was no use, the battery suddenly flickering between red and empty. The box seemed to distort the air around it, a heaviness pressing against her ears, making her head swim. She squinted at the dials, the cryptic scrawlings around the buttons. There was a frequency readout barely visible, jumping with every pulse. She fished Liam's notebook from her jacket, comparing the symbols in the margins to the ones on the device. There, a match. The triangle within a spiral, the jagged line bisecting it, scratched deep into the metal. It was more than a coincidence. This machine, whatever its purpose, was part of the riddle that had haunted Sable Lake for years. Just as she reached out, intending to turn one of the dials, a crack split the airwood, breaking under heavy feet. Olivia's instincts flared, every muscle tensing. She dropped the notebook, grabbed her flashlight, and swept it in a wide arc. Nothing but trees and darkness. But then another sound, too deliberate to be wildlife. The brush rustled closer now, followed by a hush, a whisper, as if the forest itself was warning her. She stood, every sense alert, backing slowly away from the device. In the silence, her own breath sounded too loud. She started to reach for her radio again when she saw it, a glint of metal in the darkness. Then the unmistakable reflection of two eyes, shining and inhuman. Her mind raced. Bear wolf. No, something else. The figure stepped from behind the nearest tree, tall, shrouded in camouflage face, hidden behind a mask shaped like the head of a deer, the antlers crude and splintered. Olivia froze, her hand tightening around her flashlight. From her left, another figure emerged, this one in a wolf mask, muzzle long and white eyes ringed in black paint. A third slipped through the brush, owl-eyed, and silent feathers painted across the brow. All wore mismatched gear jackets, boots, pieces of military surplus layered over civilian clothes. But it was the masks that stopped her heart. They moved with uncanny silence, fanning out around her. The deer-headed figure raised a hand, fingers gloved in black. Olivia's training kicked in. Keep them talking. Keep moving, find a way out. But the figures said nothing. They closed the circle, herding her back toward the old device. "Who are you?" Olivia demanded, her voice steady, sharper than she felt. "This is park property, you're trespassing. State your business, or I'll—" A low, distorted voice from the deer mask cut her off. "You shouldn't be here." The words seemed to echo from the inside of a cavern, the timbre wrong, digitally filtered. Olivia backed up, scanning for an opening. "I'm a ranger." "You're on protected land. Step back, hands where I can see them." The owl mask tilted its head, considering her, then turned to the device. One of the masked figures crouched and began twisting the dials with deft, practiced hands. The mechanical whine spiked, warbling higher, making Olivia's teeth ache. The red light pulsed faster, painting their masks in hellish color. The wolf-masked figure moved first, lunging forward with terrifying speed. Olivia twisted away, flashlight connecting with the figure's shoulder in a sharp, instinctive blow. She heard a grunt, felt the impact reverberate through her arm, and bolted boots slipping in the mud. She ran, dodging between trees, heart slamming against her ribs. Branches whipped at her face, and arms the ground, a blur of roots and shadows. Behind her, heavy footfalls thudded, the crunch of pursuit, too close, too organized to be random. She veered left toward the denser thicket, hoping to lose them in the undergrowth. The laughter began again, but now it was live, warped, echoing from the masks, a mockery of human joy. Olivia ducked under a low branch, nearly tripping over a half-buried root. Something heavy thudded past her ear, a rock striking a tree with a hollow thunk. She risked a glance back. Two masked figures were on her heels, the deer and the wolf, bounding with animalistic purpose. The owl lagged behind, fiddling with something on its belt. A handheld radio antenna extended the faint buzz of static, trailing after. Olivia's lungs burned, legs pumping with the desperate energy of prey. She spotted a break in the brush, veered toward it, and burst into a clearing, moonlight slashing across the space, illuminating another circle of stones. This one ringed with those same bone cairns. In the center, a pile of sticks arranged in a precise pattern, as if ready for a ritual. She hesitated half a second too long. The wolf mask crashed into her from behind, tackling her to the ground. They rolled, struggling in the dirt, Olivia clawing at the mask, the figure grunting, trying to pin her arms. She landed a wild punch to the jaw, felt the mask shift, but the figure recovered fast, pressing a forearm to her throat. "Let go!" she gasped, but the wolf only snarled, voice muffled and mechanical. The deer and owl closed in, circling like predators around a kill. The owl produced a length of cord, tossing it to the deer, who wrapped it around Olivia's wrists, binding them tight. She thrashed, adrenaline flooding her muscles, but the bonds held firm. "Stop fighting the deer, mask," intoned voice low and flat. "Why are you doing this?" Olivia demanded, breathless, heart hammering. "Who are you?" The deer leaned close, the hollow black eyes inches from hers. "Curiosity is dangerous." A hood, rough canvas smelling of earth and mildew was yanked over her head. The world shrank to darkness, her own breath hot against her cheeks. She heard the low hum of the device, the crunch of boots on gravel, whispered commands in a language she didn't know. They dragged her first by the arms, then shoulders, the ground rough beneath her knees. Olivia tried to count her steps, orient herself by sound. But everything spun. The laughter came and went, rising in time with her pulse. She listened, desperate for any clue, any weakness, a change in footing, a shift in air pressure, the scrape of a metal door. After what felt like forever, she was dropped onto cold stone. The hood was yanked away. She blinked, hard eyes adjusting to torchlight. She was in a low, earthen room. Walls of packed dirt reinforced with roots and rough beams, the ceiling so low she had to hunch. The air smelled of smoke and old sweat, tinged with something sweet and rotting. The masked figures loomed above her, now joined by others, 5, maybe 6 in total, each with a different animal visage. One checked her bindings, another rifled through her pack, tossing aside the contents. They found her badge radio and Liam's notebook, turning it over in gloved hands. "Why do you have this?" the owl asked, voice clipped. Olivia met the black gaze. "It belonged to my brother. He disappeared here. Is that what you do?" "Make people disappear." No answer. Just the silent communion of eyes behind masks, unreadable. The deer mask spoke again, softer now, almost a warning. "This place isn't for outsiders. You weren't supposed to come. Now you're part of the story." Olivia swallowed hard, anger simmering beneath the fear. "Let me go. You don't have to do this." But the wolf only laughed, a cold, broken sound. "You came looking for ghosts. Be careful, they might find you first." One by one, the figures faded into the gloom, leaving her alone, wrists bound, heart pounding in the dirt. The device's distant hum echoed through the underground, and Olivia realized her nightmare had only just begun. Still, even as fear chewed at her resolve, she stared at the dirt walls, the faint symbols scratched into the clay. The sounds above ground fading into silence. She was not beaten yet. Whatever these people were, whatever secrets they kept, she would find a way out. She always had. As she pressed her back to the wall, taking stock of every shadow, every root and nail. The laughter faded, but Olivia's determination only sharpened. This was her story now, and she would fight her way through it, no matter the mask, no matter the monsters waiting in the dark. Consciousness returned to Olivia Turner in slow, throbbing waves, the world reforming around her, one sickening sensation at a time. The first thing she felt was pain, a dull, insistent ache at the back of her skull, the stiff burn of twisted wrists still bound too tightly behind her back. Her mouth was dry, lips cracked, and the air she breathed stank of mildew, old earth, and sweat. She coughed, every muscle protesting, and tried to move, but her legs were numb, folded awkwardly beneath her body. Darkness pressed in from every side. A single flickering bulb, filthy half-choked with cobwebs, hung from an exposed beam overhead, casting a jaundiced light on dirt walls and faces in shadow. For a moment, Olivia thought she was alone. Then a muffled sob brought her fully awake. She blinked, forcing her eyes to focus, and the room began to take shape, a low-ceilinged chamber, carved out of earth and rock, propped with rough timber and crisscrossed with gnarly roots. 3 other people sat slumped nearby, 2 adults and a child, all huddled against the far wall. The older woman, mid-40s, wore a torn poncho and kept her arm wrapped protectively around the little girl who looked no older than 8 or 9. Beside them, a young man in a neon-orange travel vest rocked slowly, muttering to himself in what sounded like French or possibly Portuguese. His hair was matted face streaked with tears and grime. Olivia's mind fought through the haze, piecing together what little she remembered. The chase in the woods, the masks, the electric shock of fear. Her wrists burning as they dragged her, the heavy press of the hood, the suffocating dark. Now, she was here alive, but captured. Not alone. She took slow, careful breaths, trying not to panic. "Are you all okay?" she rasped, voice barely more than a whisper. The older woman flinched, eyes wide with suspicion, then softened. "We're alive," she murmured, voice rough but gentle. "That's something. They didn't hurt you, did they?" "Just roughed me up," Olivia answered, trying to shift her numb legs. "Name's Olivia. I'm with the Park Service. I'll get us out of here." The woman nodded, desperate hope flickering behind her exhaustion. "I'm Teresa. This is my daughter, Sophie." She hugged the girl closer. "He's Luca, from Italy. We don't know where they took the others." The word others hung in the air, heavy as a tombstone. Olivia's heart kicked. "How long have you been here?" Teresa shook her head. "I lost count. Days. There were more, I think. They take people away. Sometimes we hear screaming, sometimes nothing." Sophie stared at Olivia, brown eyes huge in the dim light. There was a cut on her cheek, blood dried and ugly. She didn't cry. She just watched, silent and unblinking. Olivia's chest tightened. Liam, at 8 years old, shy serious, the only kid she'd ever known, who never asked for help even when he needed it most. The memory hurt a blade twisting inside her, but she forced herself to smile for the girl's sake. "I promise, Sophie." "We're getting out," she said softly. Sophie said nothing, only nodded once, as if she'd already decided whether hope was worth it. A sudden clang, metal on metal, sent everyone jumping. A small hatch bolted into the ceiling at the far end of the room, rattled open. The owl-masked figure from before dropped down a battered metal bucket, its contents sloshing. The stench of stale water and hard bread filled the room. Teresa scurried to grab it before the hatch snapped shut, nearly catching her fingers. The group fell on the meager rations, hands shaking. Olivia fought to regain sensation in her fingers, working at the knots behind her back, trying not to draw attention. She scanned the room, searching for anything that might help: a loose board, a sharp stone, a splintered root. But her gaze kept drifting to the walls. Every inch of packed earth was carved, scraped, or painted with a wild array of symbols, triangles, spirals, crude stick figures with arms raised to the sky. Animal heads atop human bodies, lines of cryptic script that snaked from corner to corner. Some marks were centuries old, faded and brittle. Others were fresh, still glistening with sap or mud. Luca, rocking harder now, began muttering, "Rituais, rituai. Semprios mesmos." He pointed to the walls, tracing the patterns with a shaking finger. Olivia moved closer, squinting at a set of concentric circles surrounding what looked like a stylized human heart. Teresa caught her staring. They watch us sometimes, from the hatch, the masks. Sometimes they chant. I think it's a ritual. Old, maybe local tribes, but... She hesitated, glancing at her daughter, then leaned in to whisper, voice trembling. "But this feels wrong, twisted. Not like any tradition I've heard about. The men, one of them, I think he's not like the others. He speaks English, but with an accent. He knows the park." Olivia's mind was racing. "They ever say what they want?" Teresa shook her head. "Just patience, and to wait. for the right night. The words clawed at Olivia. She thought of the mechanical device in the woods, the weird cycles of light, all the stories she'd ever heard about Sable Lake disappearances, laughter nights, when the mist never lifted. Her ranger's logic was screaming these people were orchestrating something deliberate, something ancient, masquerading as tradition, but twisted for their own ends. Suddenly, Sophie's small hand tugged at Olivia's sleeve. You're not scared," she whispered. Olivia forced herself to meet those fragile, frightened eyes. "I'm scared, honey, but I know how to fight back." A tiny spark, almost a smile, flickered on Sophie's lips. "My brother, he's older like you. He said if I ever got lost, just look for the brave people." Her voice broke, the words shattering in the thick, sour air. "He's not here." Olivia's own grief nearly broke her composure. For a moment, her mind fractured Liam at the summit, her arms outstretched, the thunder of rocks, his scream lost in the wind. Now this girl, desperate for rescue, desperate for a future. "I'll be your brave person now," she whispered. "We have to stay strong, okay?" Footsteps overhead. The group shrank back as light filtered down from the hatch again. The deer-masked figure dropped a tattered blanket into the room, then another. No words, just the blank gaze of the mask before the hatch banged shut. Teresa shook out a blanket, sharing it among the group. Olivia took stock water, a bit of bread, a thin blanket. No weapons, no tools. The walls closed and claustrophobic, but she forced her mind to slow scan assess. There had to be a way out. She examined the marks on the walls, more closely brushing away dirt. The symbols told a story, a sequence. The stick figures were joined by others, masked animals looming above them. In some panels, the figures knelt or lay prone, as if in supplication. Others showed fire spirals of smoke lines of people vanishing into darkness. At the center of one wall, a great antlered beast towered over a line of smaller shapes. Olivia's skin prickled. She pressed closer, tracing the marks. At the beast's feet was a spiral, and within the spiral a single handprint, small, childlike. Suddenly a memory struck her. A page from Liam's notebook, years ago, filled with wild stories about ancient forest spirits. The Deer King, he'd written, takes the lost at midnight. Only the bravest can find their way back. Olivia bit back a sob. These people, they weren't just kidnappers. They were acting out some warped myth, using the old stories to justify whatever horror they intended. She turned to Luca. "You speak English?" He nodded, hugging his knees. "Did they say anything to you about why you're here?" Luca looked at the walls, voice barely audible. "They said we are gifts for the old god. The cycle must complete. I don't know what it means. I was hiking with my wife. She's gone now." A sick dread pooled in Olivia's stomach. Sophie whimpered, pressing closer to her mother. Olivia squeezed her hand, vowing silent fierce that this girl would not share Liam's fate. For what felt like hours, the captives huddled together, alternating between silence and whispered plans. The air grew colder, heavier. Olivia's mind never stopped. Every creak, every muffled voice above, every rattle from the hatch overhead fed her determination. She listened to the sounds, the dripping water, the shifting earth, the distant mechanical whine cataloging every detail. At one point, a faint vibration shivered through the floor as if something massive was being dragged overhead. She kept coming back to the marks, the sequence. The right night. A ritual, a cycle timed to something phases of the moon. The solstice. She stared at the spiral with the child's handprint mind racing. It was the center, the key. Sophie broke the silence, voice trembling. "Will they hurt us?" Teresa's hand trembled on her daughter's hair. "No, baby. Not if we stay together. Not if we're smart." But Olivia heard, the lie felt the terror in the woman's voice. She moved closer, whispering, "We have to be ready. Watch everything. Even the smallest thing could help us get out." The light flickered, shadows rippling across the animal masks painted on the wall. The spiral at their center, the handprint calling out to Olivia from across time and grief. The air throbbed with secrets, ancient, merciless. But Olivia, battered and desperate, clung to her promise. As the night deepened, as the footsteps above grew more urgent, she refused to surrender. Not for herself and not for Sophie. In that stinking haunted pit, hope was the only weapon she had left, and Olivia Turner, even on her knees in hell, sharpened it into a blade. Time in the pit bent and stretched, measured only by the flicker of the dying bulb and the rhythm of distant unseen footsteps. Olivia Turner sat with her back to the carved dirt wall, wrists rubbed raw but finally numb to pain, mind running through every survival lesson she'd ever learned. There were 4 of them now, herself, Teresa, and her daughter Sophie and Luca, whose eyes darted endlessly between the hatch and the symbols on the walls, searching for something, anything, that would make sense of their new reality. Silence pressed down thick as the earth above their heads. The others watched Olivia waiting, hoping their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. It was always like this, she realized. People waited for someone to go first to break the tension, to push back against the dark. She took a slow breath and forced herself to speak, her voice low and steady. "We're going to make it," she said. "I know this looks bad, but I've been in worse spots, out on cliffs with a storm closing in, lost in a whiteout with nothing but a dead GPS and a pocket knife. You survive by not panicking. You survive by thinking, by remembering that as long as you're breathing, you're still in the fight." Luca let out a shaky laugh, but the fear in his eyes lessened just a shade. Sophie's hand curled in her mother's. Teresa offered a sad, hopeful smile, the first Olivia had seen. "But they're so strong," Teresa whispered. "There's no way out. No one knows we're here." Olivia shook her head. "That's what they want us to believe. People give up before they have to. It's how people die in the woods. Panic makes you stupid, makes you miss what's right in front of you." She shifted her legs, aching, looking for any sign of weakness in the structure. "These walls aren't steel. That door isn't a bank vault. They're hiding just like us. Scared people make mistakes. We just have to be ready." Sophie's eyes fixed on Olivia, her voice so small it nearly vanished in the gloom. "Are you scared?" Olivia considered lying. But her training and her heart wouldn't let her. "Yeah, I'm scared. But scared is good. It means you pay attention. It means you don't give up." Luca looked up, a spark of hope igniting in the shadow of his face. "What do we do?" "First," Olivia said, "we get our heads right. No one's dying down here, not on my watch." She nodded toward the bucket of stale water. "Drink. Eat something. We need our strength. And keep your eyes open. Anything they drop, anything loose could help us." The others obeyed, gulping water and nibbling bread, the ritual of eating, steadying their hands and their nerves. Olivia pressed her wrists against the dirt, feeling for a sharp edge, a splinter, anything to work the knots loose. She whispered almost to herself, "Everything can be a tool if you're desperate enough." For a while, the pit filled with the quiet sounds of chewing, sipping, breathing. Olivia's thoughts drifted to her earliest days as a ranger training in harsh terrain, learning from veterans who'd survived avalanches, animal attacks, and every form of bad luck nature could conjure. The lesson always came back to one thing: mindset. The woods break people long before the cold or hunger ever does. Your mind is the first line of defense and the last. She closed her eyes, calling up a memory, her father's voice rough and sure. "If you get caught, live, remember your body's stronger than you think, and your mind's even tougher. Fear's a signal, not a sentence. Listen to it, then use it." She opened her eyes. "Okay," she said. "Let's talk about what we know. We're underground, but not deep roots are poking through. I think we're near the lake. The air's damp, not stale. That means ventilation, maybe more exits." Luca nodded, finally sitting upright. "When they brought me in, I felt stairs. Down, then right. The air got colder." "Good," Olivia said. "Teresa, what about you?" Teresa shook her head. "They put a hood on me. I was with Sophie. They kept saying, 'Wait for the night, wait for the cycle.'" Sophie spoke, voice trembling. "The man in the deer mask, he has keys. Big keys. And a knife." Olivia forced a smile. "That's good. You notice things. That's how we survive. Details are everything." She scooted closer to the wall, running her hands across the rough carvings. One spot gave a little, just a few grains of dirt, but it meant the earth was looser here. She turned, careful to keep her movements small, shielding what she was doing from the eyes above. Sophie watched, eyes wide with cautious hope. Teresa swallowed hard. What if they come back? Olivia kept her voice level. We'll be ready. If they come for one of us, the rest shout. Make noise, make them nervous. They're used to fear. Don't give it to them. The others nodded, some color returning to their faces. Hope was fragile, but it was catching. Sophie, emboldened, inched toward Olivia. My brother says, if you're lost, you sing, so you don't forget who you are. Olivia blinked away the sudden sting of tears. That's smart. What do you want to sing? Sophie hesitated, then began a simple melody, soft, cracked, but beautiful in the awful dark. Teresa joined in, voice shaky at first, then growing stronger. Even Luca hummed along, voice low and rough. Olivia felt the pitch change just a little. The singing was defiance, a line drawn against the dark. She thought of Liam again, his wild, hopeful energy, the way he'd turned fear into adventure with nothing but a smile and a joke. She leaned into that memory, let it warm her from the inside. As the song faded, Olivia spoke, voice clearer. I want you all to remember something. Fear can't live in the same place as hope. If you're scared, hold on to each other. We're a team now. That's how we get through this. She leaned in close, whispering, I've seen men twice my size fall apart in the wild because they thought they were alone. We're not alone. They want us to feel powerless, but we're not. Every second we're alive, we're winning. Luca let out a breath, voice steadier. We wait for our moment. Olivia nodded. Exactly. Watch for patterns. How often do they check on us? What's their routine? Does anyone seem in charge? Teresa answered, the deer mask. He gives orders. The owl is always watching, but the others listen to him. Olivia's mind raced. Good. He's the weak spot. If he comes in alone, we can rush him. If we can get the keys. A tremor ran through Sophie. I'm scared, she whispered. Olivia squeezed her hand. Me too, kiddo. But scared means you're alive. That's all we need. She turned her attention back to the wall, using her thumbnail to scrape at the soft earth, careful not to make noise. Inch by inch, she worked a small groove. Not enough to dig out now, but enough to come back to when the time was right. Above, footsteps echoed, then faded away. Olivia forced herself to breathe. She was starting to feel her wrists again, painful, but a reminder she was still here. She focused on her pulse, slow and steady, not letting herself drift into despair. The group lapsed into silence, the kind that feels less like surrender and more like gathering strength. Hope, Olivia realized, wasn't always loud or heroic. Sometimes it was just a stubborn refusal to let the dark have the last word. She thought of every story she'd ever read, every rescue she'd ever led, every time she'd stared down the impossible and found a way through. She'd never given up. Not when the snow trapped her on the ridge, not when the radio died in the blizzard, not when she lost Liam. She wouldn't start now. As the hours dragged on, she kept whispering encouragements, little reminders, jokes, anything to keep the spark alive. Sophie giggled at a story about a moose who tried to eat Olivia's hat. Luca talked about home, about the sea, about light. Teresa cried quietly, but when she finished, her eyes were brighter. By the time the bulb flickered, and the next round of footsteps thundered above, the four captives were a little stronger, a little less broken. They weren't out yet. But Olivia could feel it. Hope had begun to grow, a fragile green shoot in the dark. And with hope, there was always a way forward. The night inside the earthen pit thickened as the captives waited, hearts pounding. Breaths held, nerves stretched as thin as the damp roots writhing through the ceiling above them. Every passing second pressed the urgency of escape deeper into Olivia Turner's bones. Despair was a poison, but it was the knowledge that time was running out, the constant sense that some unthinkable ritual, some dark cycle was about to begin, that drove Olivia's mind to fever pitch. Olivia's fingers, raw and swollen from friction, finally brushed something unexpected in the dirt, a tiny, hard, edge-cold, curved metal. For a wild, desperate second, her mind conjured images of a lost key, or a knife dropped by a careless captor. But when she pinched it free and squinted in the flicker of the bulb, hope leapt in her chest. It was a hairpin. Not hers, maybe Teresa's or left behind by another victim. But to Olivia, it was as good as a master key. She glanced quickly at the others, and their eyes locked onto the small shining hope in her palm. No words were needed. In this place, silence was survival. Olivia curled over, shielding her hands from the slit of the overhead hatch, and began to work the lock at her wrists. Every click of metal on metal echoed in her skull. Her mind went back to her rookie days, learning to pick locks from a bored SAR veteran in a forgotten ranger outpost. Always be ready for handcuffs. He'd laughed, not knowing how prophetic that would be. She counted the pins by feel heart racing, with every second the hairpin flexed. Teresa and Sophie covered her motions with a makeshift shield of blanket, and their own bodies pretending to comfort Olivia while she picked. Luca kept watch, humming softly under his breath, a cover for the tension that vibrated through all of them. After what felt like hours, but was only a few minutes, there was a tiny blessed click. The cuffs fell away. Olivia flexed her hands, biting down a cry of relief as blood surged back into her fingers, tingling and hot. She signaled the others, showing them the hairpin, and quietly set to work on their restraints, all while keeping an ear out for footsteps or the ominous metallic clang from above. As Olivia slipped the last set of bindings free, a new sound echoed down the corridor boots. Slow and heavy, approaching the hatch. They all froze, pretending to be bound hearts hammering. The hatch creaked, and a cone of harsh light sliced the gloom. The owl-masked figure peered down, sweeping the group with a long look, then tossed down a battered rucksack. "For the offering," the voice said, muffled and chillingly casual, before the hatch slammed shut again. Olivia waited, counted to 60, then sprang into action. She rifled through the bag rope, a half-empty water bottle, an old pocket knife, a box of matches, and her heart leaped a small coil of fine wire. She tucked the knife into her sock, the matches and wire into her jacket. Tools. Everything could be a tool. With all four now untied, Olivia directed the group in whispers. "We need to know when they come, who comes. Every detail matters. If we can lure one down here, we can overpower them. Sophie, keep close to your mom. Luca, you stay by the back wall. If you see anyone's shadow move, signal me." For the next hour, the captives feigned defeat. Olivia, ever watchful, observed the pattern of their jailers. There was always a pair on guard above their boots, visible through the cracks. Occasionally, voices drifted down, sometimes in English, sometimes in a guttural mix of languages she couldn't place. But one voice, deeper and oddly familiar, kept surfacing. She strained to hear piecing together fragments through the murk. Then, a sound that made her blood run cold, her name. "Turner," the familiar voice said, clipped and official. "I'll handle the offering tonight. Make sure everything is ready. No mistakes." It couldn't be. That voice, she knew it. It cut through her memories, slicing back through years of trust and camaraderie. She risked a glance through a slit in the wall as one of the masked figures paced by, now unmasked for only a second, believing themselves safe in the torchlight above. She saw his face creased, weathered, the copper beard and ice-blue eyes of someone she'd once considered a mentor, maybe even a friend. It was Doug Halverson, a senior ranger, former supervisor, the man who'd taught her how to track wolves, who'd written her first recommendation, who'd stood with her after Liam vanished and whispered, "Some things in these woods are older than laws live." He was here. He was one of them. The shock was a fist to the chest, nearly doubling her over. She pressed a hand to the dirt wall to steady herself, fighting back bile and disbelief. How many nights had she trusted his judgment, his knowledge of these woods? How many times had she heard the old-timers joke? Halverson knows every shadow and evergreen. He is the forest. She'd never once doubted him. Until now. Olivia struggled to keep her face neutral as she turned back to the others. "Change of plan," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "There's a guard, he's one of us. A ranger. I know him. We can use that. If I can get close, I can talk to him. Maybe he'll slip up. Maybe he's the weak link." Luca's eyes went wide. "You trust him?" "No," Olivia said, her voice flat as a knife. "Not anymore. But I know how he thinks." The next hour was a blur of waiting, listening, memorizing patterns. The captives began to notice more, the way the guards checked each other's equipment, the way the owl-masked one always kept to the shadows, as if afraid of being recognized. Olivia caught snippets of conversation, "The shipment's late. The buyers won't wait forever. Once the cycle is finished, we clear out, leave the masks, burn the evidence. It was less a cult, more a syndicate, a business masked as a ritual. Through tiny holes in the dirt and gaps in the planks, Olivia and Luca pieced together more vans arriving at odd hours. Men and women, some masked, some not, herding dazed bound figures from the forest edge to makeshift tents and then into vehicles. One woman, her face swollen, was shoved into a truck with plates from across the border. Another captive, a man with tattoos, argued in Russian with a guard before being silenced with a blow. All the pieces slammed together in Olivia's mind. This was bigger than any one ritual. The masks were a cover, a chilling play acting that borrowed old legends to terrify and confuse. In reality, it was an international operation. Abductions, trafficking, maybe worse. The horror of it made Olivia shake with rage. This was why the disappearances never added up, why no one ever returned, why the park's secrets multiplied year after year. She thought of the stories she'd grown up with, the Deer King, the lost children, the old warnings about Sable Lake. Halverson had always been the one to recite them, always the one to shush the rangers when they got too close to the truth. He hadn't been protecting the forest. He'd been hiding in plain sight. Sophie tugged Olivia's sleeve, voice barely a breath. They took someone else. I heard them say, the last one before dawn. What does that mean? Olivia swallowed, choosing her words carefully. It means they're almost done. But so are we. When they come for us, we'll be ready. We'll fight. They're not expecting that. Teresa gripped her daughter tight. We're with you. Olivia outlined her plan, voice low and urgent. When the hatch opens, I'll rush the first one down. Luca, grab his legs. He's big, but slow. Teresa, you shield Sophie. I'll get the knife and the keys. If we can get out, we run for the tree line. There are trails they don't know about, old poachers' paths. I marked them years ago. A tremor ran through the floor, an engine revving above. Olivia's heart hammered. We do this together. No heroics. We stick close. The captives nodded resolve, hardening their faces. As footsteps gathered above, Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, grounding herself in the memory of Liam's laugh, her father's lessons, the green vastness of the world waiting above. She would not fail these people. She would not let Halverson or anyone turn the forest into a tomb. The bulb overhead flickered, throwing monstrous shadows across the ancient symbols and the thin faces of the captives. Olivia pressed the hairpin into her palm, the tiny wire now bent and battered, but still ready. When the hatch creaked, all four braced, ready for the fight, ready for freedom, ready to tear the masks from every secret, no matter how monstrous the truth beneath. In the darkest pit, a spark of resistance flared. Olivia Turner, forged in tragedy and tempered by hope, would not let the forest claim any more lives. The hatch jerked open, flooding the pit with pale pre-dawn light. Olivia moved first, all muscle and momentum launching upward as the first masked captor bent to reach inside. The shock of her attack caught him off guard. A shout, a scuffle, the rasp of metal as she slammed her shoulder into his chest, and they tumbled together down the ladder. Dirt showered the captives, Luca and Teresa moving instantly as planned. Luca wrenched the man's legs, toppling him sideways, while Teresa grabbed for the ring of keys and the knife dangling from the captor's belt. A second masked figure loomed in the hatch above Owl Mask, wielding a length of pipe. Olivia locked eyes with him, saw the flash of recognition, the shock of a leader seeing his plan fracture. She grabbed the knife from Teresa, blade glinting in the harsh light, and slashed at the captor's bindings. Sophie cowered behind her mother, clutching the blanket like a shield. The chaos was total, shouting boots, pounding keys, jangling, and the stink of fear so thick it made the air choke. Go! Olivia shouted, and the group surged up the ladder in a desperate scramble. Luca shoved the fallen captor aside and clawed his way upward, shoving the hatch open wider. Olivia hauled Sophie under one arm, boosting her up, blood slicking her palm from a scrape she barely felt. Teresa followed, gasping, pushing her daughter forward. They exploded into the open, a jagged clearing shrouded by towering pines, dawn smearing bruised purple and gold through the heavy mist. The world felt twice as big after the suffocating pit. The cold bit at their faces, and the ground sucked at their shoes. Olivia didn't stop to marvel or breathe. She scanned for landmarks, for the half-remembered trails and game paths she'd memorized years before. All around them, the woods were waking up the calls of crows, the flutter of startled jays, the wind threading through the trees like a warning. Behind them, alarm bells, real and imagined, screamed to life. A siren wail cut through the trees, followed by the barking of orders and the scatter of boots as the captors realized their prisoners were gone. Olivia heard the leader's voice, Halverson unmistakable roaring above the others. "They're out east side. Cut them off at the ridge masks on now." She grabbed Sophie's hand. "Stay with me. No matter what, don't let go." Sophie's tiny fingers gripped hers with desperate trust. They crashed through the undergrowth. Olivia in the lead, scanning for the hidden exit, she remembered a deer trail that curved around a cluster of rocks and through a narrow ravine. Luca and Teresa kept pace, the two adults, half carrying, half dragging the girl between them. Olivia's every step sent pain shooting up her leg, the knee she'd twisted during the escape now throbbing with each footfall. She gritted her teeth and pressed on, forcing her mind to stay sharp. The mist grew thicker as they plunged deeper into the woods, swallowing sound and blurring the world to shadows and suggestion. Branches raked their faces, tore at sleeves. The earth here was treacherous, root-laced, pocked with old sinkholes, every step a gamble. Olivia's breath burned in her lungs, the cold air ragged and sharp, but she drew from reserves of grit she hadn't known she still possessed. A crash echoed from behind their pursuers, where close spreading out voices reverberating through the trees. "Go left. Watch the river there." Olivia veered sharply, angling for a shallow gully she'd once mapped in another lifetime. A hidden defile that cut behind a wall of limestone and would dump them near the old fire road. The ground angled steeply down. Sophie stumbled, nearly fell, but Olivia snatched her, up the girl's heart drumming against her own chest. A shot cracked behind them, wild and high, thudding into a tree. The group ducked, huddled together for a heartbeat, and kept running. Teresa's breathing was ragged, tears streaking down her cheeks. I can't." "You can," Olivia said fiercely. "It's only a little farther. Trust me." A shape lunged out of the fog ahead, owl mask blocking the path, a makeshift club swinging for Olivia's head. She twisted, felt the wind of it at her temple, and rammed her shoulder into the figure's chest. They grappled, boots sliding in the mud. Luca seized a branch and slammed it across the mask, shattering it with a crack. The man went down stunned, and the group leapt over him, hearts hammering. Now the chase was truly on, shouts and curses, commands in several languages. Olivia realized this was no cult. This was a well-drilled crew, professionals working in rhythm, the masks, both disguise and psychological weapon. The horror was sharper for its organization. This was not madness, but calculation. They burst out onto the edge of a steep ravine, the fog thinning enough for Olivia to spot a faint game trail snaking along the cliff's edge. Below, the world fell away into blue shadow and a chaos of broken stone. Olivia hesitated, judging the drop, then forced herself onward, leading the group single file along the perilous ledge. Sophie whimpered as stones slipped beneath their feet. Olivia pressed her body between the girl and the edge, steadying her with every step. Below, a river thundered, white water churning around shattered logs. A shout from above, a pursuer had found the trail. Olivia risked a glance back, deer mask and wolf mask moving with terrifying speed, eyes locked on their prey. A rock skittered past, bouncing into the void. Olivia's heart hammered. She focused on each step, the smell of wet lichen, the ache in her leg. Suddenly, her foot slid on slick moss, and she went down hard, slamming her knee into stone. Pain exploded up her thigh, blinding. She cried out, biting her lips so hard she tasted blood. Sophie fell with her, Olivia's arm locking tight around the girl's waist, both of them dangling inches from the drop. Teresa and Luca hauled them up, trembling and gasping. "Go," Olivia rasped. "Don't stop." But Sophie wouldn't move. She clung to Olivia, sobbing. "Don't leave me, please." Olivia forced herself to her feet, teeth clenched against agony. "I'm right here. Not leaving. Ever. We go together." They pushed on, every step a test of endurance, the world reduced to breath and pain and the need to keep moving. Olivia shielded Sophie with her body, taking every blow, every scrape. Her vision swam, blood running from her knee, cold sweat beading her forehead. The trail finally widened, leading to a tangle of willows and an old logging road half buried in brambles. Olivia spotted the rusting hulk of a long-abandoned truck landmark safety a promise. Almost there, she gasped. But the kidnappers were nearly on them now, deer masks sprinting ahead, club raised, howling. Luca turned, picked up a stone, and hurled it. The man ducked, but tripped on a root and tumbled off the trail, crashing through brush. Wolf Mask hesitated, torn between the fallen leader and the fleeing captives. Olivia and her group scrambled for the road shoes, slipping in the churned earth. She shoved Sophie through the brush, Teresa following. As Luca burst free, a hand snatched his sleeve. Wolf Mask, eyes wild behind painted plastic, hauling him back. Olivia, seeing only a flash of violence and terror, limped forward and drove her elbow into the mask's jaw. The plastic cracked. The man staggered, and Olivia rammed the knife's hilt into his ribs, just enough to make him gasp and loosen his grip. Luca broke free, and they all tumbled onto the road, breathless and shaking. For a split second, the world was still, just the four of them, battered and bleeding, but alive. But the pursuit wasn't over. A car engine roared to life somewhere in the woods, headlights flaring. Olivia knew the road looped back toward the lake. It was only a matter of minutes before they'd be cut off. With no time to lose, she grabbed Sophie in her arms, ignoring the scream of pain in her knee, and pushed forward. They plunged off the road, crashing through tangled brush and over a collapsed log, the world behind them, exploding with noise and confusion. Olivia's body screamed at her to stop, to rest, to surrender. But she refused. Not while Sophie's small body pressed against her. Not while the hope of freedom was so close. They ran until the mist swallowed everything. The forest, the road, the pain, the fear. Shouts faded behind them, replaced by the frantic drumbeat of their own hearts. Olivia's vision blurred, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but she would not let go. Not of Sophie, not of hope, not of the determination that had carried her through every loss. In the end, it was not strength or luck, but pure will, the refusal to break the stubborn grip of a survivor that carried them through the final stretch. Olivia, battered and bleeding, led her little band through the maze of trees, each step a victory. And as the sun finally clawed its way above the horizon, burning through the last of the mist, Olivia knew one thing. With absolute certainty, she would get them out. She would never stop fighting. Not for herself, not for Sophie, not for the lost children or the ghosts that haunted the forest, not for anyone except for the living, those who still had a chance. The forest seemed to hold its breath, every needle and branch prickling with anticipation as Olivia and her group broke through a snarl of fir and birch. Her lungs were on fire, her battered knee threatened to give way at every desperate stride. But the adrenaline of survival kept her upright. The others, Luca, Teresa, and the trembling Sophie, clustered close behind, all wide-eyed and wordless faces streaked with mud, blood, and hope. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit fractured the stillness. Frantic shouts, the thud of boots, the hiss of radio static as the kidnappers swept the woods, closing the circle. Olivia glanced over her shoulder and saw not 30 yards away the unmistakable bulk of Doug Halverson, her former mentor, now leader of this monstrous masquerade. His deer mask glinted in the weak morning sun, and even through the grotesque veneer, Olivia felt the heat of his rage. He bellowed orders, but his focus, his hatred, was locked on her. This way, Olivia hissed to her group, shoving through a thicket into a pocket of low-lying fog. She saw the land drop ahead, a shallow ravine cut with a stream and slick, mossy stones. If they could make it to the other side, there'd be a field of deadfall impossible for vehicles and hell for men in masks to navigate quickly. But as they moved, Olivia's injured leg finally betrayed her. She slipped, sprawling, hard pain slicing up her side. The world spun. In that moment, Sophie shrieked a warning, not of pain, but terror. Halverson was there. He'd broken from his men and moved with impossible speed. For a man his age, he was shockingly agile. Years of ranger work, of living in the woods, had forged him into something elemental. He bore down, grabbing Olivia by the collar and hauling her to her feet, shoving Sophie aside. "Run!" Olivia shouted, voice raw. Teresa swept Sophie away. Luca pausing only long enough to see Olivia's nod before dragging the others deeper into the mist. Now it was just the two of them, circling breath, steaming in the cold. The forest seemed to shrink around them, every tree, a witness, every shadow, holding secrets. Halverson's mask was cracked at the jaw, his eyes wild behind the slits. "You never knew, did you, Liv?" His voice was rough, half mad. "All these years you thought the forest took him. Thought it was fate." Olivia kept her stance low, watching his hands, her mind racing for advantage. "You came for Liam." She didn't ask, it was a statement jagged and bitter. Halverson smiled, teeth flashing beneath the mask. "We come for the strong ones, the clever ones. Your brother, he almost got away, thought he could hide in the storm. He left us a mess to clean up." His tone twisted into a sneer. Smart kid, just like his sister. Rage and horror warred in Olivia's chest, but she used it, let it fuel her. "Where is he?" "He ran," Halverson said, circling closer. "Nearly died on the mountain. But he beat the cycle, the only one. Left me with a lesson: live, never underestimate the ones who don't quit." The world shrank to the space between them, the air charged with old betrayals. Olivia saw for the first time the battered knife at Halverson's hip, the same one he'd taught her to use years ago. She gritted her teeth, her own stolen blade slick in her palm. He lunged. She sidestepped, letting him crash into a birch, then slashed at his mask, hoping to blind him. Plastic splintered, but Halverson shrugged off the pain, driving a fist into her ribs. She gasped, stumbling back. He pressed, knife flashing, but Olivia parried with the blade, steel screeching on steel, the echo lost in the fog. Why, Olivia demanded between blows, forcing him to speak. Why the masks? Why the rituals? Halverson grunted, swinging wide. "People want to believe in monsters. Makes them easy to disappear. The stories cover the truth. Nobody looks for bodies when they think the woods took them." He swung again. Olivia ducked, slamming her shoulder into his gut. They crashed to the ground, rolling in mud and dead leaves. Halverson's grip was iron, but Olivia was faster, twisting, scraping, fighting for leverage. "You taught me to read the woods," she spat, fighting for breath. "But you forgot. I know them better than you." She broke free, rolling to her knees, snatching a handful of dirt and hurling it into his eyes. He roared blindly, slashing the air. Olivia darted left, circling behind him, scanning for a weapon, a rock, a branch, anything. He turned, face twisted with hate. "You should have joined us, Liv. You have the spirit. The world's not kind to the weak." "I protect people," Olivia snarled, gripping her knife tighter. Halverson lunged again, knife glinting, but this time Olivia was ready. She sidestepped, grabbing his arm, using his momentum to throw him off balance, her training turning survival into instinct. She pinned his wrist, twisted, felt the knife drop and kneed him hard in the side. He buckled but didn't fall. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, mentor and protege, predator and survivor. Halverson growled, pulling free, but Olivia slammed her elbow into his jaw, the deer mask cracking fully and falling to the forest floor. His face, lined, streaked with blood and dirt, was nothing like the mentor she remembered. It was the face of a man hollowed out by cruelty. "You can end this," Doug, Olivia said, voice trembling. "Let them go. Let me go." Halverson spat, chest heaving. "It ends when I say so." He rushed her bull-like. Olivia sidestepped, then used his weight against him, sending him tumbling toward the stream. He scrambled up, knife flashing, but Olivia seized a fallen branch and swung with every ounce of strength left in her body. The wood splintered against his forearm, sending the knife skittering into the mud. Halverson bared his teeth, charging again, grabbing her throat with both hands. Olivia fought for air vision tunneling. She remembered Liam, his laugh, the promise in his eyes the day he'd run into the storm. She remembered every lesson learned, every victim saved, every dark night survived by grit alone. Summoning every ounce of strength, she jammed her thumb into Halverson's eye, forcing him back with a scream. She twisted out of his grip, snatched the fallen knife, and pressed it to his throat. He stilled, breathing hard, chest rising and falling. "Do it," he hissed. "Prove you're stronger." But Olivia, bloodied, exhausted, every muscle quivering, shook her head. "You don't get to decide who I am." She used the flat of the blade to knock him out, not kill. Halverson slumped to the earth, unmoving. Olivia staggered back, gasping, vision swimming. Behind her, the remaining captors broke through the trees, but halted at the sight their leader felled, the mask cracked open, the truth bare. Olivia leveled the blade, body trembling, but voice clear. "It's over. Drop your weapons. Move and I swear I'll—" But they scattered, terrified by the sight of Halverson, defeated by the ferocity in Olivia's eyes. The group was free. Teresa and Luca gathered Sophie, who ran to Olivia, flinging her arms around her waist. Olivia hugged her back, fighting tears of relief, of exhaustion, of long-suppressed grief. In the distance, the first hints of sirens echoed search teams, drawn by gunfire, by smoke, by the unraveling of secrets too long kept in shadow. Olivia waved them down, her body aching, but her heart steady. As the law swept in, rounding up the last of the kidnappers, Olivia knelt beside Halverson's body. She pressed her hand to the earth, whispering for Liam, for the lost, for the saved, for everyone who'd ever disappeared into the forest. She knew now that her brother had run, had fought, had survived as long as he could. She'd finished what he started. Olivia rose, battered and unbroken, leading the survivors from the woods. She'd kept her promise. She'd brought them out. The forest at last released its ghosts, and Olivia Turner, forged by loss, guided by hope, walked forward into the dawn. The shrill wail of police sirens cut through the cool morning air, growing louder with every heartbeat as search and rescue teams swarmed the forest clearing like an army descending upon a battlefield. The golden light of dawn spilled over the trees, casting long shadows that trembled with the urgency and chaos unfolding below. For Olivia Turner, the taste of fresh air was sharp and raw, laced with exhaustion and relief. Her limbs ached, her body bruised and battered, but she moved with steady determination, guiding Teresa, Sophie, and Luca through the throng of officers and medics who rushed to surround the survivors. Blankets were wrapped around trembling shoulders, hands were held tightly, and murmured reassurances passed from rescuers to captives. Olivia's gaze scanned the scene, wary but hopeful. She saw the faces of exhausted men and women, rangers, deputies, paramedics, who had braved the night alongside them, risking everything to bring them out alive. But even amid the urgency, Olivia's mind latched onto one figure in particular. A young man who stood just beyond the immediate chaos, leaning against a gnarled pine, with an expression that was part disbelief, part guarded hope. For a moment, Olivia felt as though the world slowed. The noise dimmed and the swirling crowd fell away, until it was just her and the boy, and a flood of memories she hadn't dared confront in years. The young man's features were hauntingly familiar. The same dark hair that curled just above the ears, the same deep-set eyes that held a fragile spark of resilience. It was impossible to ignore the unmistakable reflection of someone Olivia had once called family, now standing before her, a living bridge to a past she had thought lost forever. Her breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned. This was Ethan Harper, the son of her closest friend from childhood, Sarah. Sarah, who had vanished without a trace over a decade ago, leaving behind a heartbroken family and a web of unanswered questions. Olivia had searched for Sarah, kept the hope alive in the quiet corners of her life. But the years had dulled that hope, burying it beneath layers of grief and resignation. Now, here was Ethan, alive but scarred, a survivor in his own right, pulled from the jaws of a nightmare that Olivia had only begun to understand. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, a tumult of guilt relief and an overwhelming surge of protective love. Slowly, tentatively, Olivia approached him. "Ethan." Her voice was barely above a whisper, thick with emotion. He looked up, eyes widening, the wariness in his gaze softening. "Olivia, is it really you?" Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, it's me. You're safe now. You're really safe." The boy's defenses crumbled. He took a step forward, and she opened her arms, pulling him into a fierce embrace. His body was thin and worn-marked by the harsh months of captivity, but the strength in his hug was a powerful testament to his will to survive. Around them, the world seemed to hold its breath. The crowd of rescuers, still busy with triage and securing the area, faded into the background as two souls reunited after years of silence and pain. Olivia's tears fell freely now, mingling with Ethan's, as they clung to each other, an anchor in the sea of chaos. Nearby, Teresa watched with tears streaming down her face, Sophie clutching her hand tightly as she whispered, "That's what hope looks like. Luca nodded solemnly, eyes glistening with the raw intensity of shared survival. The reunion sparked a ripple of emotion that spread through the clearing. One by one, rescued victims found their own moments of connection. Families reunited, friends embracing strangers who had become comrades in the darkest of hours, sharing quiet smiles of relief. Olivia pulled back from Ethan, brushing hair from his damp forehead. "Tell me everything," she said softly. "What happened? How did you survive? How did you find your way here?" Ethan swallowed hard, eyes dark with memories. "It was hell. They kept us hidden, moved us around. We tried to escape a few times, but they were always watching, always ready. I thought I'd lost everything, my mom, my home. But when I heard the others whisper about a rescue, I held on to that hope." Olivia listened, every word a thread weaving together the fragmented truths they had uncovered in the forest. She realized that Ethan's survival was not just a miracle, but a beacon proof that the nightmare could be ended. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light on the battered survivors, Olivia found herself surrounded by people whose stories mirrored her own loss and hope. The forest had taken many, but it had spared these few, and in their survival lay the possibility of healing. Medics gently examined each person, tending to wounds, offering blankets and water. Olivia watched as Sophie smiled for the first time since their capture, her small hand reaching for Olivia's with trust and gratitude. Teresa whispered prayers of thanks, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. In the midst of this fragile calm, a uniformed officer approached Olivia with a tablet displaying a list of missing persons. Scanning it, Olivia's heart lurched. Among the names was Sarah Harper's, officially declared missing for years. But now, with Ethan found alive, the pieces of a long, cold case began to shift. The implications weighed heavily. The disappearance of Sarah, the decades of lost time, the web of trafficking and violence that had ensnared so many, all connected by threads, Olivia had only just begun to unravel. She stepped aside, pulling Ethan close, whispering promises of justice and protection. They were survivors now, but the fight was far from over. As news of the rescue spread, reporters arrived, their cameras flashing as they captured the raw moments of reunion and relief. Olivia felt the weight of their gaze, but focused instead on the faces of those she had saved, their futures still uncertain but undeniably alive. Later, as the survivors were loaded into ambulances and vehicles bound for hospitals and safe shelters, Olivia stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the sun rise fully above the horizon. The forest behind her seemed quieter now, as if acknowledging the end of a dark chapter. In that moment, Olivia felt the deep connection that spanned generations, the echoes of loss and love, grief and hope, that tied her to Sarah, to Liam, to every soul who had ever disappeared into the wilderness and been found again. She touched Ethan's shoulder gently. "We'll get through this," she said firmly. "Together." And beneath the spreading light of morning, the promise of healing stretched ahead, a fragile but unbreakable thread, binding the past to the future, one survivor at a time. The early morning sun cast long shadows over the sprawling command center at the edge of Evergreen National Park. What was once a peaceful woodland had become the epicenter of a sprawling investigation that would unravel decades of secrets and lies. Police vehicles, forensic vans, and media crews lined the dusty roads, a vivid symbol of the magnitude of the operation now fully underway. But for Olivia Turner, standing quietly at the heart of it all, rescue was only the beginning. The fight for justice, the true reckoning, had only just begun. Inside the temporary headquarters, teams of detectives, forensic experts, and federal agents pored over heaps of evidence. Photographs of the carved symbols discovered on the trees and rocks. Shards of broken masks, blood-stained clothing, and small pieces of technology stolen from the kidnappers were meticulously cataloged and cross-referenced. Each piece was a thread in a complex tapestry of terror, woven over decades, a tapestry now unraveling under the sharp eye of investigators. Lead Detective Sarah Hendricks, a woman known for her unyielding pursuit of the truth, surveyed the evidence laid out across the tables. She had been tracking this case for months, and now the breakthrough was finally at hand. The focus of their investigation, Doug Halverson. Once a respected senior ranger, A mentor figure who had earned Olivia's trust years ago, Halverson was now revealed as the dark mastermind behind a web of abduction, trafficking, and murder, cloaked by the wilderness he was supposed to protect. The evidence was overwhelming. Forensic analysis placed Halverson at the scene of multiple disappearances. His fingerprints were found on electronic devices used to intercept park radio frequencies, and financial records revealed large unexplained transfers to offshore accounts linked to trafficking networks. More than that, survivor testimonies painted a chilling portrait of a man who had used his knowledge of the terrain, his position of trust, and his understanding of local legends to lure victims into traps from which few escaped. "It's worse than we imagined," Hendricks said grimly to Olivia during a briefing. "This wasn't just a local crime ring. It's an international trafficking operation using Evergreen as a staging ground." The so-called rituals were a psychological weapon intended to intimidate and silence. Olivia nodded, the weight of the betrayal pressing heavily on her chest. To think that Halverson, a man she had once looked up to, had been orchestrating such horror for decades was almost unbearable. Yet she steeled herself. For every victim, every survivor, every lost life, justice had to be served. Across the country and even into Canada, coordinated arrests followed swiftly. Rangers, park employees, and outsiders complicit in the crimes were apprehended one after another. Some had been coerced, others motivated by greed or fear, but all were now facing the consequences of their actions. The network's reach had been extensive, covering not just the Rocky Mountains, but stretching into urban centers where victims were trafficked to unknown destinations. One of the most dramatic moments came when federal agents raided a heavily fortified compound in the remote Rockies, a lodge where the captives were held before being moved to other locations. SWAT teams stormed the premises under cover of darkness, quickly subduing armed guards and freeing dozens of terrified victims locked in grim underground cells. The operation was hailed as a triumph, a decisive strike against a criminal enterprise that had preyed on the innocent for far too long. At the command center, Olivia stood amidst the whirlwind of activity, her mind flashing back to the faces of those she had led from the darkness, the stolen children, desperate adults, and frightened families who now had a chance at life again. Among them was Ethan Harper, the son of her childhood friend Sarah, whose disappearance had haunted Olivia's heart for over a decade. Now, with Ethan's rescue, pieces of a cold and painful puzzle were finally coming together. News crews flocked to the site, their cameras flashing as survivors told their stories, testimonies of horror and survival that gripped the nation's attention. Olivia found herself at the center of the media storm, interviewed on countless platforms, where she spoke not only of the crimes, but of hope, resilience, and the urgent need for reform. But beneath the spotlight, Olivia's real work was far from over. She spent long hours supporting survivors, helping them navigate the trauma of captivity and guiding them toward healing. She advocated tirelessly for improved safety measures for park employees, pushing for mandatory GPS tracking, enhanced communication protocols, and psychological evaluations to prevent such tragedies from recurring. In quieter moments, Olivia reflected on the painful journey from the loss of her brother Liam to the dark revelations about Halverson and the syndicate he led. The forest that had once seemed so serene had revealed itself as a place of shadow and deceit, but also of profound courage and survival. Olivia knew that the scars on the land mirrored those on the souls of the survivors. Yet she also saw the seeds of renewal. At one poignant reunion, Olivia stood beside Ethan as he met relatives for the first time in years. The embrace between father and son was raw and unguarded, tears flowing freely. Voices trembling with emotion, Olivia felt the weight of every lost year. Every unanswered question and every moment of fear, now replaced by this fragile but powerful reconnection. The park, scarred but still majestic, seemed to exhale a long-held breath. Rangers and community members gathered to honor the survivors and remember the lost, holding vigils beneath the towering pines where the air was now heavy with both sorrow and hope. As the investigation proceeded, courts convened to hear the charges against Halverson and his accomplices. Testimonies detailed years of abuse and corruption, weaving a narrative of power abused and lives shattered. Yet through it all, survivors found voices and strength, refusing to be silenced. Their courage sparked new legislation aimed at protecting vulnerable populations and tightening oversight on federal lands. Olivia's role evolved from survivor to advocate her story, inspiring nationwide campaigns and awareness efforts. She worked closely with lawmakers, sharing insights from the case to shape policies that would prevent future tragedies. The forest that had once threatened to swallow her whole had instead become the battleground where justice was claimed. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, Olivia often walked the trails she once patrolled, each step a tribute to those lost and a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. The woods held secrets still, but now they also held the promise of healing and protection. The truth, long buried beneath layers of fear and silence, had finally emerged into the light. And with it came justice, painful, hard-won, but undeniable. Olivia Turner, survivor and guardian, stood as a testament to the power of hope and the relentless pursuit of truth. The forest would never forget, and neither would she. The days that followed the rescue blurred together like shards of a fractured mirror, each one reflecting a different piece of Olivia Turner's tangled mind and battered heart. The physical wounds she carried were healing, slowly, knitting together under the care of doctors and nurses. But the deeper scars remained raw, jagged edges hidden beneath the surface. The forest she once roamed freely a sanctuary, and a teacher now felt like a place filled with ghosts, whispers of what was lost, and shadows of what had been endured. Olivia woke most mornings feeling like she was carrying the weight of the world alone, a heavy shroud of guilt and doubt clinging to her chest. How many had she saved? How many had slipped through the cracks? The faces of those she couldn't reach, the ones lost to the darkness, haunted the edges of her thoughts. She replayed the moments over and over, the crack of the masks, the desperate scramble through the trees, the sound of Sophie's small hand in hers. She asked herself silently if she had done enough, if she could have done more. Sleep came only in fragments, invaded by nightmares, where the forest closed in, where shadows whispered secrets she didn't want to hear. At times she'd wake choking on tears, heart pounding like a drum. And yet the days marched on, relentless and unyielding, each one bringing the challenge of facing a new dawn with a heart battered but unbroken. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting a warm amber glow over the recovery center, Olivia found herself alone in a quiet corner of the courtyard. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. Her fingers trembled as she pulled a small envelope from her bag, an unassuming piece of paper that would come to mean more than words alone ever could. She hesitated for a moment, then carefully broke the seal. The handwriting was delicate, familiar, in a way that stirred something deep within her. Her eyes scanned the page, and the letter unfolded like a lifeline thrown across the chasm of her despair. Dear Olivia. It began, the words flowing with a tenderness that caught her breath. I don't know if you will ever read this, but I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for saving my Sophie. Watching her smile again, to hear her laugh after all she's been through, is a miracle beyond words. Olivia paused, tears gathering in her eyes as she traced the letters. The mother spoke of gratitude, but also of understanding, the recognition of the burdens. Olivia carried the silent weight of survival's price. The letter was a beacon of light, acknowledging the pain and trauma while offering something even more precious, hope. The words went on softly, urging forgiveness, not just of the horrors that had been inflicted, but of the guilt and self-doubt that threatened to consume Olivia. You carry the pain of those you couldn't save. The letter said, but please know this, you did everything you could. You fought with a courage that gave Sophie and so many others a chance to live. Please forgive yourself as I am learning to forgive. We are all healing together. Olivia's tears spilled freely, now the letter a balm to wounds she hadn't dared tend. In those fragile lines, she found permission to let go of the blame, to accept that survival was not about perfection, but persistence. It was the first step on a path she had long been afraid to walk. With the letter clutched to her chest, Olivia left the bustling hospital and returned to the forest, the place where her healing must truly begin. The trees, ancient and steady, welcomed her back like old friends, their whispered breezes offering a quiet solace. She walked slowly along familiar paths, the crunch of leaves beneath her boots grounding her in the present. At the edge of a small clearing where sunlight danced through the branches in golden patterns, Olivia sat beneath the sprawling limbs of a towering cedar. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the scent of pine and moss fill her lungs. The steady pulse of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a wood thrush wrapped around her like a gentle embrace. She thought of Sophie, of Teresa, of Luca, and of Liam, the boy who had once been her brother, lost in these woods, but never forgotten. In the quiet green cathedral of the forest, Olivia felt the stirrings of something fragile, but undeniable hope. Each day she returned to the woods, finding strength in small rituals. She planted wildflowers in a forgotten corner, bright bursts of color growing amid the shadowed undergrowth. She traced her fingers over the bark of old trees, feeling the rough texture, the pulse of life beneath the surface. She lit candles at the base of an ancient pine, whispering prayers for those lost and those still fighting. Her journal became her confidant, pages filled with raw reflections, memories, and dreams for the future. Writing released some of the heavy grief, transforming it into words that carried meaning and purpose. Slowly, the forest became not just a place of memories, but a sanctuary of renewal. In the evenings, Olivia would walk to a small stream hidden deep within the park. The water was cold and clear, tumbling over smooth stones with a soothing murmur. Kneeling by the bank, she dipped her hands into the rushing current, letting the chill wash away the day's pain. She watched as the sunlight fractured across the ripples, reminding her that even in the darkest places, light finds a way through. Sometimes she sang softly songs her grandmother had taught her, lullabies carried down through generations. The melody floated through the trees, a thread of healing woven into the tapestry of the forest. The birds answered their calls, weaving in and out a chorus of life, reclaiming the shadows. Olivia reached out to the community that had rallied around her, finding solace in shared stories and collective strength. Survivors gathered in support groups, their voices a chorus of resilience and courage. Together they navigated the long road of recovery, their bonds forged in the crucible of shared trauma and hope. Through it all, Olivia carried the letter from Sophie's mother. Close a reminder that healing was not linear, but cyclical, a dance of light and shadow. She learned to forgive herself, to honor the pain without letting it define her. The forest whispered its ancient wisdom: growth comes not from perfection, but from the courage to keep reaching toward the sun. One afternoon, as the first hints of spring colored the forest floor with wildflowers, Olivia stood at the edge of a clearing, watching a gentle breeze ripple through the trees. The air was fresh and alive, filled with the promise of new beginnings. She closed her eyes and let the warmth seep into her bones, feeling for the first time in a long while the steady beat of hope rising within. The journey ahead remained long and uncertain, but Olivia knew she was no longer alone. The forest had become a place of healing, a witness to her strength and renewal. And in the heart of that ancient green world, Olivia Turner found not just survival, but the promise of a future bright with possibility. The transformation was quiet at first, like the gentle unfolding of dawn's light over a long, dark night. Olivia Turner, once a figure defined by trauma and survival, slowly emerged as a beacon, a symbol not just of endurance, but of the fierce, unyielding spirit that could reclaim even the most shattered lives. Her story spread far beyond the borders of Evergreen National Park. News outlets, documentaries, and social media amplified the tale of a woman who had faced unimaginable horrors and refused to be broken. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a living testament to hope's relentless power. Communities from across the country, and even across borders, looked to Olivia as a source of inspiration. She spoke openly about the shadows she had endured, her voice steady and sincere, never shying away from the darkness, but always pointing toward the light beyond. Her honesty and vulnerability touched countless hearts, giving courage to those wrestling with their own battles. Fundraisers, advocacy campaigns, and support networks blossomed in her wake. Survivors found strength in her example, and people who once felt powerless began to believe in the possibility of healing and change. Olivia's efforts helped spark policy reforms that improved protections for vulnerable populations and expanded resources for trauma recovery. She worked tirelessly not just to tell her story, but to rewrite the narrative for others. Among the most poignant moments was the decision to reopen Sable Lake, the place once feared shrouded in legend and lost, now destined for rebirth. The authorities, community leaders, and families of the missing collaborated to transform the site into a living memorial, a sanctuary of remembrance and renewal. The reopening ceremony was a solemn, moving event. Survivors, families, and advocates gathered by the lake's shimmering surface, now cleansed of the fear and sorrow that had long haunted its shores. Candles flickered in the twilight, casting golden reflections upon the water, while soft voices recited the names of those who had vanished, honoring lives lost, acknowledging pain endured, and promising remembrance. Olivia stood at the center of the gathering, the weight of countless stories pressing gently upon her shoulders. She spoke with quiet strength, her words weaving a tapestry of hope and remembrance. This lake, she said, was once a place of silence and shadows. But today, it becomes a place of light. We remember those we lost, yes, but we also celebrate the strength of those who survived, the power of community, and the hope that lives within each of us. Her voice broke slightly, the emotion raw and true. Hope is not just a feeling, it's a choice. A decision to face the darkness and still reach for the dawn. That is the legacy we honor here. The ceremony concluded with a release of lanterns, their soft glow drifting upward, carried by the night's breath, a symbol of lives lifted beyond pain, of healing ascending. In the weeks and months that followed, Sable Lake blossomed into a place of pilgrimage and peace. Trails were restored and marked with plaques telling stories of courage and resilience. Art installations crafted by survivors and local artists transformed the landscape into a vibrant tapestry of remembrance and hope. Visitors came not just to mourn, but to find inspiration. Families walked the paths, hand in hand, children's laughter mingling with the gentle ripple of the water. The forest, once a silent witness to tragedy, now sang with the voices of healing. Olivia often returned to the lake, finding solace in its quiet beauty. Each visit was a reminder of the journey from darkness to light, from fear to courage. She walked the shoreline slowly, the soft earth beneath her feet grounding her, the shimmering surface reflecting the unbroken spirit within. She sat beneath a towering pine one afternoon, watching the sun's golden fingers stretch across the water, and felt a deep sense of peace. The lake, like her, had been scarred, but like her, it had found a way to shine again. Her story was no longer just about survival. It was about transformation, about the power of hope to heal, to unite, and to inspire change. And as the forest around Sable Lake blossomed anew, so too did the hearts of those who came to know Olivia Turner, not just as a ranger or a survivor, but as a living symbol of the enduring strength of the human spirit. The dawn was soft and slow, a gentle amber washing over the tranquil surface of Sable Lake. Olivia Turner stood at the edge, the cool morning mist curling around her like a whisper from the past. In her hand, she held the small hairpin, a simple object that had meant so much more than just a tool. It had been her lifeline, a symbol of resilience through the darkest hours. Today, it was her farewell. She knelt beside the water, fingers trembling as she released the hairpin. It glimmered briefly in the sunlight before sinking beneath the glassy surface, carried away by the gentle current. A quiet surrender, a letting go of the pain and shadows that had long clung to her soul. Behind her, the world was waking. Families gathered, laughter blossomed, and survivors embraced one another, their faces marked by healing, but alight with hope. Children's voices filled the air, weaving through the tall pines like a song of renewal. The lake that once held sorrow now reflected the light of rebirth. Olivia's eyes lingered on the ripples spreading across the water, each one a reminder of the ripples her own story had sent outward, touching lives, inspiring strength, binding hearts. She thought of Liam, Sophie, Teresa, and all the souls who had crossed this path, their stories intertwined in a tapestry of courage and love. As the sun rose higher, casting golden rays that danced across the leaves, Olivia turned toward the gathering. A circle of survivors and families reunited, their smiles bright and tears mingled with joy. The bonds forged in adversity were unbreakable, the promise of tomorrow shining clear. A soft breeze carried the faint sound of laughter, light and free, breaking through the solemnity. like a herald of hope. Olivia smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Even in the deepest forest, she whispered, "There is magic." When we refuse to surrender to fate, miracles happen. And with that, the story faded into the morning light, an enduring testament to the strength of will and the healing power of love.